Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Jerusalem Press Club briefing. My name is Talia. With just under 2 months before Israelis head to the polls, the parties are scrambling to weigh their options ahead of next week's deadline to submit their lists of candidates to the Parliamentary Elections Committee. Joining the Jerusalem Press Club today is Knesset member Merav Michaeli, selected earlier this week by a significant majority of 77% to lead the once dominant Labor Party of Israel. First of all, congratulations on your victory.
Thank you so very much, Talia.
And thank you for taking the time to speak with us as well.
It's my pleasure.
So, according to recent polls, Labor may not even pass the threshold necessary to enter Knesset. Columnist Anshel Pfeffer wrote in Haaretz that you are taking on the worst job in Israeli politics. What is your strategy to win the hearts and minds of Israelis to save Ben-Gurion's party?
Wow, the worst. I don't think that I subscribe to this description at all. First and foremost, I want to, if you will, I think the two most major polls, one from last night on Channel 12 and the other from, I think, Sunday night or Monday night, Channel 13. In both, we passed the threshold. And not only did we pass the threshold, but I think it's like 8 times more voters in the polls than Labor had for the past two years. So it's very significant. And I actually think that it's not the worst job in Israeli politics, but rather the best one, because I have a genuine opportunity to rebuild or at least to start this rebuilding of the center-left political camp in Israel. There's the reality in Israel is really, I think it may happen also in other places in the world, but in Israel, for too many years now, there's a huge gap between what Israelis care about, what they think, what their positions on the issues are, and between the available political representation to them. Since the center-left camp has been crumbling ever since the campaign that Netanyahu started in 1993 against Rabin, against Oslo, against the left, against the Arabs, against democracy, etc., etc., and Labor as the leader of this camp and the one that its prime minister was assassinated. I mean, this is something that we really cannot exaggerate in the significance of this act. The center-left camp has, lessened and lessened to the point where it does not have a political body that can function in this field and can be a future ruling party. This is why I took on this, like head-on, really, this insistence on rebuilding Labor. Because if we don't have a political body that, like a party that can actually do the work in the political field, then I don't know what will become of Israel.
Okay, so the ideology is clear. Let's perhaps move on to the strategy on the ground. Will you be joining forces with Ron Huldai and Ofer Shelach? And do you think that the leaders of these smaller parties will set their ego aside and take lower spots on the list?
My first and foremost goal is to rehabilitate Labor, so it's clear that it can stand alone, even if obviously it does not become a ruling party in a day back again, but that I want to take off this hovering of a question mark. Does it or does it not pass the threshold? I want it to be clear that it is passing the threshold and that it can stand alone. And from this position, to come to whatever dialogues or cooperation with whatever other, and I should say these are not parties, but rather lists made by one person that one can esteem more or less, but those are lists that were handpicked by several people and not a party with a way, with vision, with foundation, with roots, with anything. So I do hope, I don't hope, I am committed to do the right thing to make sure that no votes are lost and that the center-left political camp really exhausts its political power and maybe even enhances it. But I think it's a little bit too soon to know exactly what will happen. And another thing that's important to emphasize is that the coming Monday, it's all in a crazy, crazy timeline, I know, but we are holding a primaries for the list of labor. That is yet another thing that we're doing differently than the others. Labor is going back not only to working according to its vision, to being a home of truth and reliability for people, but a democratic place where the members, first of all, anyone can register, and anyone can also register to run as a candidate. And the people will actually vote and elect their representation. So on Monday, I will have a list by the end of Monday. And this is also like another stage that we have to cross on the way to whatever corporations we do with other lists.
Understood. If then you are holding a primary on Monday, how then do you think your constituents will feel if after the results of the primary are made clear, Labor does end up joining forces with other lists as you put them before the deadline?
Well, I think everyone's aware of the necessity to not allow any risks for loss of votes and loss of political power. I think everyone, anyone who registers today knows that they're joining a task that is first and foremost, of course, to try and achieve the values that we all fight for. But politically speaking, they are joining the rebuilding of labor, the restart of labor, but they know that the list may, at the end of the day, may consist of also other components. But it's a very valid point that you're making, and for me, it's very important to really have the as much as possible the part that was elected democratically to be the dominant part in whatever list is composed at the end of the day.
Okay, very clear. So you've already made it very clear also that you do not intend to join a Netanyahu government. You've made this clear, contrary to other members of your party who did. Who then is the realistic candidate for prime minister that you will support?
That is a very big question that I still do not have an answer to.
Okay, if we do look at the options that are on the table, should we understand that any of these options will be more aligned with Labor's ideology, or are you open to other candidates, perhaps Gideon Sa'ar, whose party has both a hawkish leader and members of his party and his list are former members of the Likud?
No, listen, as I said, Labor is going back to being a home for its own values. The drama of Labor is not that it has the wrong vision or the wrong ideas or ideology. It's that it's been operating against all of those for many, many years. Labor was saying the right things, but doing the contrary things. I mean, it was joining right-wing governments, executing right-wing policies, things that Labor in principle is very much against. Now, Gideon Sa'ar is practically the opposite of most of the things that we believe in. Politically, geopolitically, in terms of his attitude to the justice system, economically and socially, of course. So in a normal world, there was no question of whether there would even be a possibility of Labor sitting with Gideon Sa'ar. Of course, we have no idea. I mean, I think we need to keep in mind that the polls that we're seeing today do not necessarily reflect the results of the elections in Israel. Everything is very fluid and changes. So 2 months before elections is considered like really a long time. I realize that there may be a possibility where the priority would be to replace Benjamin Netanyahu, and that would take cooperation by many parties that might not have gone together in any other circumstance. This is something that is obviously a possible scenario, even though far from guaranteed. So we'll have to see. Again, first, we're very far from that point right now. There's so much uncertainty on the way. We still have so many varies that we have no idea how will turn out. So really, unfortunately, right now, I still do not have a candidate for prime minister.
Understood. Okay, you talked a lot about the ideologies and the left-right divide. If we look at the economic plan, the economic, I guess, exit plan that the government has been taking and continues to take over the last year in response to the coronavirus, we see that the use of public funds has been very very free, contrary to what is a classic right-wing economic approach. In the last 24 hours, 2,448 people filed for unemployment in Israel. What is your opinion of the way things have been managed on the economic end, and what would your plan be? What would you like to see to be done over the next few months?
The way Netanyahu was handling the pandemic is outrageous. It's really scandalous. It's irresponsible, and it was deeply, deeply damaging. Not only are the numbers of sick and dead far, far too high, and we have lost far too many people than we should have and could have, but also the devastation of people's existential security in the social and economic sense is really bad. And I am not at all against spending public money. By all means, I think the government should spend money on its society and on the citizens, but it should be done in a responsible way, in a constructive way. What Netanyahu has been doing now that he wants again to just throw money at everyone so they would feel that they received a present from him and will vote for him, this money should have gone now to the hospitals that are just not holding the pressure. They have no room anymore. They don't have staff anymore. They need this money like air. And instead of investing it in the health system so Israelis can get the cure that they need, he's just throwing money around. If it was ever clear enough the difference between the policies that we believe in that built the Kupot Cholim. How do you translate Kupot Cholim?
The health ministry offices. I'm not sure. Health ministry.
Like,
it's HMO. I'm not sure what the abbreviation is.
It's like designated health corporates that are kind of public. That's what it is. Okay, so it's a public health system that is very well structured, so well structured by labor in the early days of Israel, so that even Netanyahu's abuse over the years has not succeeded in demolishing it. And this is why the whole huge operation of vaccine in Israel is working so well. This is the answer, and Netanyahu's policy is the problem. So instead of realizing how well this is working and that this is the thing that Israel and Israeli society needs so much, he really denies from the hospitals right now the help and the support that they need. And instead he's throwing money, or at least, again, saying that he will, because nobody knows he will get the authorization to do it. So the spin will be enough. I'm sure there are plenty of people that the mere declaration of wanting to give them money is enough for them. But this is really, it's it's so irresponsible. It's so terrible. And Israelis, at the end of when we pass the pandemic, will be left with so much ruin, emotional, social, educational. There's a big piece in the Marker this morning about the fact that Israeli children have lost the largest number of school days in the OECD or other countries. And they are lonely, they are depressed, they are lost, they are less educated, obviously. All of these are really horrible damages that we will have to reconstruct, rebuild. Hopefully we can move Netanyahu aside in order to be able to do that.
Okay, just a few other areas we'd still like to cover in the time that we have left. How does it feel to be one of only 2 women party leaders currently running?
I'm always asked by students in every age, how does it feel to be a woman in the media? How does it feel to be a woman in politics? I can ask you that back, Talia. I've never been a non-woman in any of those places. So I don't know what it feels like to be a man. And I'm sure from my experience, whenever I speak about the discrimination against women, I know that men feel that that when we talk about men's privileges, the personal and private men never feel that it's about them. They don't feel the privilege. They feel that they have to fight and work very hard. But then again, they've never been women in this same situation, so they have nothing to compare to. I think the fact that it's only me and Chagit in the Jewish home goes to show the backlash that we've been dealing with in women's status in the last years in Israel, when masochistic and religious and reactionary forces are gaining more and more power in politics and are fighting against the achievements that we had in the decade and a half before that. And it also manifests in the weak, very weak representation that women have in politics nowadays. And given that I am now in this race and realizing how much power you have to cope with that is being pushed on you, realizing how much we as women are not brought up to deal with power. I mean, we actually were being brought up to be nice and avoid everything that has to do with power. And of course, if you want power, or if you're ambitious in any way, or if you exercise power, then immediately you get spanked because you're not feminine enough. It's certainly not designed for women. So in this sense, it's a challenging job, but challenges are created in order for us to be able for them to I don't know, deal with them, cope with them, to win them, to whatever it is. So
Okay, we'll move on to a few other issues. I have a few questions on one topic, the topic of the future of the two-state solution, and of course, the peace process. So rather than asking all of them, because we are running out of time, I'm going to nominate maybe 2 parts to one question and answer however you see fit. The first question is, do you have a strategy to recover from the peace process after the Trump administration in today's new era of Biden? And also, do you have a way to convince Israelis that there is a partner for peace if this two-state solution is still in sight?
I think too little people are aware of the fact that still, after 26, 27 years of the Netanyahu era, a small majority of Israelis still supports the two-state solution. I mean, a majority believes that it's unachievable, but they still support it. So I don't see the challenge in convincing Israelis that there is a partner. Well, the challenge is to put in the prime minister's chair in Israel, someone with the political will to figure out a solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because where there's a will, there's a way. And there have been a number of ways that have been suggested along the years. And now with the Abraham Accords, we can, and agreements, we can leverage the new relationship with the new countries. And of course, other countries are very willing to join when a peace process with the Palestinians will take place. Let's remind everybody that we have the Arab League Peace Initiative that was already presented to Israel in 2002. And we could have been in a completely different place if any Israeli prime minister had ever responded to this initiative and used it as a basis for negotiation. So I am convinced, as I always have been, and became more convinced after 7 years on the Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee in the Knesset, and with my very deep involvement in everything that has to do with those issues. There are many ways to go about a solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The only missing thing is the political will. This is the challenge. You do not have to even convince Israelis. You don't, because again, as I said, after all these years of incitement and delegitimization, still there's a majority that supports the two-state solution. The problem is, like, by the way, in many other issues, Israelis are for equality, for civil equality, for gender equality, for equality to the gay community. They are for, obviously, they are very much for social economic equality, and they are for peace, but they have no one in the government to work in order to change reality. So it reflects what they actually want and believe in. And the same goes for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's not about the Israeli public. It's about the center left being able to work in order to get back in power and to really work for the things it preaches for.
Were you saying that the Abraham Accords were a wasted opportunity to move forward with negotiations with the Palestinians? And if that's true, does that mean that we shouldn't have proceeded in them?
No. I voted for them, obviously. No. I'm not saying it was wasted. I said that we need to leverage them for the finding a solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I voted for, of course I voted for them. I'm happy that they happened. I'm happy that we have peace agreements or normalization agreements with more Arab countries now. It's extremely important. I just want to be able to leverage them in order to find a solution for the most dramatic conflict for the existence of Israel, which is here at home. And what I did say that there was the time was wasted since 2002, that no one in Israel has leveraged the Arab League Peace Initiative. That is the time that was wasted. Unfortunately, again, as I said, in the prime minister's chair right now, there's a prime minister who does not have the will to figure out a solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So that makes it a little impossible for it to happen.
Right, understood. You mentioned the religious sector in the context of women's rights and so forth, but we also need to talk about the issues that have been occurring over the last week, actually over the last year more so. But in the last week, we've seen the violent demonstrations in the ultra-Orthodox sector. The coronavirus itself has highlighted the need for Israeli society to bridge gaps with these sectors. How do you plan on addressing these issues in the next Knesset?
Again, unfortunately, Netanyahu has been in power for so long that it's really frustrating that everything goes back to him, but it does. And since, I don't know if you remember, but a few years back when we reached the very uncomplimenting data of #1 in the OECD in poverty and in the Gini criteria, Netanyahu's unbelievable response was, if you deduct the Arabs and the ultra-Orthodox, we're doing just fine. We're just great, was it? I think to a large extent, his policy was deducting ultra-Orthodox and Arabs in different strategies. The Arabs are deducted by exclusion and discrimination and delegitimization. And the ultra-Orthodox are deducted by giving in to their political leadership and political representation and to their rabbis in a way that does not at all serve their community needs. The ultra-Orthodox communities and the Arab community on both are two very big societies that largely consist of people who are first and foremost Israelis. They're not first and foremost other identities, but still this policy imposed their sectorial identity on them and also denied them from basic rights, civil rights that created inequality and also creates this mess that is happening now. A lot of ultra-Orthodox are suffering from this situation. And the escalation, the constant escalation that is also heated, of course, by things that are being shown on the media, and then the general public is cross at the ultra-Orthodox, and the ultra-Orthodox are defending themselves, and they're entrenching, obviously, and it's a very, very problematic, a very damaging dynamic. And instead of trying to heal it and to work towards all kinds of, bridging, what Netanyahu does is he thrives on it. So this is a major, major issue. Ultra-Orthodox and Arabs should be treated equally in Israel, according to the law.
Will they appear on Labor's list to represent
their
their communities?
They always have. Labor always had representation from the Arab society. We had religious people on the list, not ultra-Orthodox, but religious people on the list. Let me remind you, there is a primary and anyone can run and anyone can be elected. So, and to me, one of the things that I'm emphasizing when I'm speaking out is I think it's majorly important that we abandon the discourse of the identity politics that has become so poisonous and so devastating. And we need to look again at people as citizens, as human beings, to think of the bigger good that there is to be achieved, about our common interests as a society. We need to step out of this sectorial discourse. It's just really devastating.
Very, very clear. Just one last question before we wrap up that came in from a journalist now, although I do have a feeling that I know what the answer will be. Both Blue and White and Amir Peretz are being punished by the public for entering into a government with Netanyahu. What did you know last summer that they did not?
I think it was clear to anyone with his eyes in his head. Why would they think that the same thing that happened to Ehud Barak, to Shaul Mofaz, to Bougie Herzog for even only negotiating with Netanyahu, to Kahlon, to anyone who believed Netanyahu found himself ruined. So, I mean, it was really, the writing was on the wall. It didn't really demand a lot of insight, just a lot of, I guess, echoing.
Understood. Member of Knesset Merav Michaeli, head of Israel's Labor Party. Thank you again for taking the time to speak with us, and best of luck.
Thank you so very much. Have a good day.
Okay, and thank you to my colleagues, JPC Director General Uri Dromi and Press and Programs Coordinator Rachel Benziel for facilitating this briefing. Stay tuned for more briefings and interviews with candidates for Israel's general election. We hope you enjoyed that briefing by the Jerusalem Press Club. If you did, like the video and hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with all of our future content.